The Pentagon's war room was in chaos. Top generals and senior strategists stared at the tactical map of the South China Sea, watching Blue Force units systematically fail against an elusive Red Force commander. Every conventional move was anticipated and countered. The outcome of the simulation carried real-world consequences if Blue Force failed here. It could expose critical weaknesses and risk escalation in the actual region. Amid the rising tension, a quiet voice broke through. Major Chen, a decorated psychological warfare specialist often dismissed as too junior for the main table, pointed to a forgotten battle in the Korean War. They're not thinking like modern strategists, they're using Sun Tzu's deception patterns. The room fell silent as she outlined an ancient countermaneuver that could shift the balance. But would the brass listen to a junior officer? If you believe underdogs can change history, hit subscribe and watch how she turned the tide. Inside the Pentagon's Strategic Command Center, the exercise began as just another test of doctrine and technology. Dozens of senior officers and analysts settled in as the simulation's countdown reached zero. The war room screens flickered to life, outlining every ship, aircraft, and submarine operating across the South China Sea. Admiral Wainwright gave the order to commence, and Blue Force assets sprang into action. Satellite feeds updated in real time. Carrier strike groups moved into formation, and submarine positions were confirmed by encrypted channels. They executed textbook naval doctrine, confident their high-tech systems would outmatch any Red Force gambit. Aerial patrols established a broad defensive net, destroyers fanned out into picket lines, and stealth bombers ran through simulated strike patterns. Junior officers logged weapons readiness and response times, while senior strategists observed the unfolding patterns for any sign of deviation from the plan. Red Force activity at first fit established intelligence. Missile batteries on shore came online at expected intervals. Submarine contacts appeared within standard detection ranges. Electronic warfare assets activated, but their signals matched familiar threat profiles. Major General Cole, reviewing the first half hour of data, looked up from his tablet and nodded. "Nothing unusual so far," he said, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly as confirmation codes scrolled across the displays. But as the exercise continued, subtle irregularities emerged. One Red Force corvette squadron shifted course near the Spratly Islands, breaking from its predicted route. Satellite telemetry picked up faint, inconsistent heat signatures from patrol vessels that should have been moving in formation. Lieutenant Colonel Vance flagged these discrepancies, but the report was quickly labeled as low-priority scenario variation. "Probably just a bit of randomness programmed in," a senior analyst said, waving off any concern. Simulation controllers monitored the exercise from behind glass, quietly adjusting difficulty parameters. They introduced minor communication delays between Blue Force units, mimicking real-world disruptions under electronic warfare. The carrier group commander requested extra radar coverage when his screens showed conflicting returns for fast attack craft, but the request was denied. Resource allocation protocols dictated reliance on default detection systems. Exhausted staff snapped at one another as each new countermeasure failed to restore the expected operational rhythm. By the 2-hour mark, Blue Force had committed most of its available assets, following contingency plans designed for overwhelming force. Commanders cycled through approved responses as new threats appeared, confident that their training and technology would eventually blunt the Red Force advance. The pace felt familiar: periods of heightened alert, followed by routine mitigation, just as in countless earlier simulations. Yet, the Red Force began to exploit overlooked seams. Their units transmitted on frequencies that Blue Force countermeasures filtered out as background noise, allowing them to reposition without detection. Rear Admiral Cho noticed a troubling trend. Blue Force was expending significantly more munitions than projected, with little to show for it. He mentioned it to the operations director, who shrugged it off as within acceptable exercise variance. Cho returned to his station, uneasy but unwilling to challenge the explanation. Anomalies accumulated. A Red Force submarine squadron disappeared from sonar for nearly a minute, something the dense sensor grid should have prevented. Near Scarborough Shoal, 3 red destroyers overlapped their radar signatures, briefly appearing as a single vessel and slipping away before Blue Force could react. Each incident was logged and rationalized, never quite rising to the level of immediate concern. The first real turning point seemed trivial. A Red Force supply ship altered course by 12 degrees while passing contested waters. The adjustment placed it directly across the paths of 3 separate Blue Force patrols, a coincidence that would only become clear much later. By then, Blue Force rapid response units were already committed elsewhere, their actions shaped by threat assessments that failed to account for deception. As the exercise entered its next phase, the war room's confidence began to erode. Patterns were shifting, and the familiar solutions no longer produced the expected results. Unusual signals started to ripple through the Blue Force network. Early in the morning, a Red Force frigate group near the Paracel Islands executed a familiar evasion maneuver, but their destroyer escort was missing from every radar sweep. Blue Force tracking algorithms responded as programmed, shifting air and sea patrols to intercept. Yet, when satellite imagery updated, the frigates were holding formation exactly as predicted, destroyers in place. No one questioned the discrepancy, systems simply recalibrated, and operations pressed on. At the main surveillance station, junior technicians noticed their screens displaying contradictory information. One feed showed a Red Force amphibious group advancing towards Scarborough Shoal, while another placed the same unit miles away near Macclesfield Bank. The technical team reviewed the anomaly, finding no faults, and logged it as a minor data sync issue. The incident was quickly forgotten, but it marked the beginning of a pattern. Blue Force losses mounted quietly. An offshore patrol vessel was lost to what would later be revealed as a layered drone and missile ambush. The loss was deemed acceptable, attributed to the exercise's risk parameters. But when 3 more ships fell to similar tactics in rapid succession, Fleet Command chalked it up to bad luck and adjusted their engagement protocols. Jamming routines were added, and patrols tightened, but the underlying confusion only deepened. Communications teams began to experience unexplained delays. Secure channels, usually instantaneous, now lagged by seconds during critical maneuvers. Diagnostics found no hardware faults. The suspicion of subtle electronic interference was raised, but senior analysts dismissed the idea, insisting no adversary possessed such advanced capabilities. The unexplained latency remained, slowing decision-making at key moments. Satellite imagery developed its own anomalies. Analysts compared radar and infrared signatures, finding slight but consistent mismatches in Red Force ship positions. The discrepancies were small, a few percentage points off, yet they forced additional verification steps and delayed targeting confirmation. Each delay eroded Blue Force's response time. Fleet Command responded with textbook doctrine. Carrier groups tightened their formations after sensor ghosts appeared along the first island chain, a standard move against suspected electronic warfare. But the adjustment only made Blue Force units more vulnerable, drawing asymmetric harassment from Red Force units that exploited the new clusters. Each engagement pulled more resources into defense, gradually sapping Blue Force's flexibility. By mid-morning, Blue Force had spent nearly a third of its missile inventory, most of it on decoys. Weapons officers noticed the drop in effectiveness, but attributed it to normal exercise variance. Reports filtered up the chain, only to be filed as routine. Maintenance teams faced a new challenge. System alerts phantom overheating. False coolant warnings began to appear, just as critical decisions were being made. One technician noticed a pattern. These distractions always arrived seconds before high-stakes maneuvers, drawing attention away from actual threats. His observation went unheeded as the pace of the exercise accelerated. In the command gallery, the atmosphere shifted. Each unexplained loss and system error pushed the leadership further from certainty. The sense of mounting dread was unmistakable. Officers exchanged terse glances as their trusted frameworks failed to explain the unfolding events. Doubt crept in, and the war room's confidence eroded, replaced by a quiet urgency to regain control. As the next phase of the simulation approached, Blue Force leaders braced for an escalation they could neither predict nor counter. The turning point arrived without warning. On the bridge of the USS Antietam, radar screens filled with the signatures of incoming Bomber 12 fast-moving contacts, perfectly matching known adversary profiles. The air defense officer acted immediately, scrambling interceptors and bringing the Aegis system online. Every step followed protocol. What no one realized was that the bomber signatures were a deception, a formation of drones mimicking the radar profile, positioned just far enough from the real threat to draw attention away. While the Antietam's defenses focused on the decoys, 3 submarine-launched hypersonic missiles threaded through the exposed corridor. Damage reports hit the war room in rapid bursts. The Antietam suffered simulated strikes to propulsion and command. 2 destroyer escorts went dark, their systems overwhelmed by electronic warfare that left fire control inoperable. Within minutes, nearly half the strike group's defensive capability was rendered useless. In that moment, the war room realized they weren't facing random glitches. They were trapped in someone else's ancient playbook. Admiral Wainwright's composure cracked. His jaw set. A bead of sweat traced his temple as he slammed a fist onto the console. Around him, officers scrambled to coordinate damage control and reassign defensive assets, but the sense of command slipped away. Orders sent across the encrypted network lagged by precious seconds, just long enough for Red Force to adjust and press their advantage. Satellite operators struggled to reconcile conflicting feeds. Red Force carriers seemed to jump hundreds of kilometers in a single update, while targeting officers argued over which data streams to trust. The war room fractured. Some generals demanded immediate missile strikes on suspected Red Force staging areas, hoping to regain the initiative. Others pushed for a withdrawal to rally points outside the contested zone. A few technical advisors suggested deploying experimental electronic countermeasures, though those systems would take too long to bring online. Every debate circled back to the same problem: Blue Force responses were always a step behind. Analysts soon uncovered a deeper issue. A meaningful portion of the contacts tracked for hours were digital ghosts' false returns, with convincing thermal, radar, and even comms signatures. These illusions had drained Blue Force resources through constant alerts, masking genuine threats and exhausting the defenders. Exercise controllers, monitoring the simulation from behind glass, noted the mounting strain. Biometric data showed heart rates climbing, voices tightening. Cognitive overload registered across the leadership team. The atmosphere thickened as pressure mounted and options narrowed. Near the rear of the war room, Major Chen watched patterns others ignored. She noticed that Red Force units consistently blocked Blue Force escape routes before withdrawal orders were given. Electronic interference peaked at the exact moments weapon systems calibrated. And every Red Force action followed a timing pattern: movements, attacks, and retreats, all spaced in intervals familiar to students of ancient military doctrine, but alien to modern planners. As another Blue Force cruiser group fell to a feigned retreat near the Luzon Strait, simulated losses climbed beyond worst-case projections. The countdown to evaluation ticked lower, with Blue Force casualties threatening to reach unsustainable levels. Admiral Wainwright's frustration grew as status reports turned red, and staff exchanged anxious glances, searching for answers that weren't coming. In the midst of this chaos, Chen's observations took on new urgency. The unfolding disaster was no longer just a matter of technical glitches or unlucky breaks. Patterns emerged, deliberate, historical, and invisible to those locked into conventional thinking. She weighed her next move, credentials in hand, sensing that the solution required more than just another adjustment to the plan. Major Chen watched the chaos unfold from her post at a secondary console near the war room's rear entrance. Her role as an observer kept her outside the command circle, but her clearance let her access every data feed in the room. Chen's focus was different from the general's hunched-over casualty reports. She tracked not just Blue Force losses, but the cadence of Red Force attacks, the timing of system failures, and the rhythm of electronic interference pulsing through the network. Her specialized training at the Army War College, with a focus on historical deception tactics, uniquely positioned her to see what others missed. As the simulation spiraled, Chen's expertise in psychological warfare gave her a lens the others lacked. Where senior officers saw random aggression, she recognized orchestrated confusion, a deliberate campaign, echoing strategies from ancient Chinese dynasties. She noted that Red Force feigned retreats in precise intervals, always matching Blue Force's standard reassessment windows. Their electronic attacks peaked at the exact moments. Blue Force operators rotated shifts, exploiting every momentary gap in familiarity. The patterns weren't coincidental. They followed principles laid out in classical texts she'd studied in detail. Her heart pounded, interrupting a Tier 1 exercise could end her career if she was wrong. Still, she pressed on, overlaying live feeds with archived battle maps. The match was unmistakable. The enemy was copying a mid-century manual. She pulled up records from the 1953 Battle of the Hook, an obscure Korean war clash. In that battle, UN troops walked into staged retreats and radio decoys, just like today. The deception wasn't just on the surface. It was woven into every move, every delay, every false contact. Chen cross-referenced the data streams that others dismissed as noise. Satellite glitches, comms, delays, radar anomalies all clustered around key decision points. Each disruption was engineered to steer Blue Force into predictable responses. The deeper she looked, the clearer the pattern became. Red Force wasn't overpowering Blue Force. They were guiding them, funneling assets into carefully prepared traps. She reviewed declassified Cold War studies on Soviet deception. Those campaigns used layered false signals to overwhelm decision-makers, creating a Hall of Mirrors effect. Red Force had refined the tactic-fabricated sensor data, so convincing it passed every verification check. Chen realized modern doctrine treated deception as a supporting tactic, but here it was the main strategy. Every Blue Force reaction, from missile launches to patrol shifts, only tightened the net Red Force had cast. The solution was stark. Blue and Force had to break the cycle, stop playing by the script the enemy had written. She closed the historical files and opened a tactical map, plotting not where Blue Force was, but where Red Force wanted them to be. The vulnerabilities weren't accidents, they were bait. If Blue Force ignored standard protocols and redeployed to areas Red Force left unpressured, the pattern could be broken. Chen stood from her console, the weight of her decision heavy. 12 minutes remained until the evaluation phase. She tucked her copy of The Art of War under her arm and approached the raised command dais, where the senior officers argued over the next move. She pressed her access card to the verification pad, requesting immediate floor privileges. The system chirped, and every screen in the war room flashed with the notification. Marge, Chen, Intel, Warfare Div, requesting priority brief. The debate on the command platform reached its peak as the room registered the interruption. Chatter died instantly. Dozens of eyes cut to her firmly held stance. Major Chen stood at the primary briefing station, her posture unwavering despite the weight of senior scrutiny. She didn't wait for approval. With a single swipe of her access card, the main display shifted from casualty tallies to her prepared analysis. In a few keystrokes, she brought up 2 map zones showing current Red Force movements. The other, a battle map from 1953. The overlay was unmistakable. "They're not innovating," Chen said, her voice calm and direct. "They're recycling." She traced the parallel lines of engagement near the Spratly Islands, highlighting how each maneuver mirrored deception tactics from 70 years earlier, the same feigned retreats. The same timing of electronic interference. The senior officers, caught off guard, watched as she pointed out the rhythm and repetition, each step mapped to a historical blueprint. General Sheridan tried to dismiss the link, but Chen pressed on, noting how the Red Force's actions weren't random. They were deliberate echoes of a playbook written long before modern sensor grids. With 2 simple maps zone live, one from 1953 exposed their deception blueprint in seconds. She summarized the logic for the room. The Red Force's false signals, phantom contacts, and staged withdrawals all matched the cadence of the historical battle. Blue Force's own systems, she explained, had been tricked into flagging decoys as real threats because the enemy anticipated every standard response. Her analysis tied each current anomaly, whether radar ghosts or delayed comms, back to the same historical tactics. They're using Sun Tzu's principles, she said, referencing a highlighted passage on her tablet. Appear weak when you are strong. Appear scattered when you are organized. The realization spread quickly. Admiral Wainwright ordered an immediate audit of all tracked contacts. The results were sobering. Nearly half the Red Force units on their screens were confirmed or suspected fabrications, all positioned to lure Blue Force into kill zones. The war room's confidence, already shaken, gave way to a tense silence. General Cole challenged Chen to prove that changing tactics would make a difference. She responded by overlaying projected losses. If the current strategy continued, Blue Force would be rendered combat ineffective within minutes. Chen then outlined an alternative. Instead of reacting to every provocation, she suggested seeding 3 peripheral zones and consolidating forces where Red Force pressure was minimal. The move broke with standard protocol, but targeted the enemy's reliance on predictability. Wainwright called for a probability analysis. The system calculated a 68% chance of breaking Red Force's cycle if the plan was executed immediately. Junior officers scrambled to adjust deployment orders. Chen explained that by refusing to react to certain provocations and overcommitting elsewhere, Blue Force could disrupt the enemy's timing. Satellite feeds soon showed confusion among Red Force units. Their coordinated maneuvers faltered as Blue Force patterns shifted unpredictably. With minutes left, Wainwright authorized full implementation of Chen's plan. The risk was high, but the alternative was certain defeat. As Blue Force units moved to new positions, Red Force response times slowed, their strategy unraveling. The simulation's outcome now depended on whether a junior analyst's insight could outmaneuver a modern military AI. Major Chen's countermaneuver not only saved the simulation, it rewrote the rules of engagement. If you found her insight as inspiring as we did, like and subscribe for more untold tales of women who changed history.